Welcome to One Word Stories. Today I'm really thrilled to host a very special guest of mine, Diana Hofner-Safier, who comes originally from the USA, has gathered her experience in Japan, and is based in Mexico, in Mazatlan currently. A very warm welcome, Diana.
Thank you very much for having me, Joanna. I appreciate it.
Diana is known in the intercultural field as the founder of Cultural Detective, a very powerful tool to work across cultures, but also for Ekotonos. Those of us who have been working with it, they know the power of this simulation. And currently, actually, Diana is a passionate founder and owner of one more company, namely Through Di's Eyes. So Through Diana's Eyes, that gives us the perspective of seeing the world through the lens, a real photography lens, through Diana's eyes. And there are amazing pictures, and Diana has just opened the exhibition in Mazatlan in Mexico. So fantastic that such exhibitions also are taking place currently. And Diana is also a very powerful instructor and trainer. I had the great pleasure to meet you several times during different conferences in Europe, and then also to attend a fantastic cultural detective session in Vienna, still before pandemic hit. So Diana, a very warm welcome. I'm happy to host you.
Thank you for having me here, Joanna. It's a pleasure. I am really excited that you've been doing this series of podcasts during the pandemic. It's wonderful. Great energy, great way to cope with the having to stay inside part of this pandemic.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, because, you know, it just was the moment when I realized, wow, there are so many fantastic people around the globe who have been working with stories for a while, and they can share so much of their experience, how we actually can better apply storytelling, but also story listening practices in the intercultural field, but also to foster diversity and inclusion. And as Diana brings so much experience from the executive field, I'm really happy to say that our focus is also laid on working with stories in the leadership context. How did your adventure start with working with stories and, you know, just having this detective eye on values behind?
Yeah. I have never been asked that question before, but I think if you ask me my adventure in stories, I think most of us have loved stories since we were children, right? Because it's a basic method of learning and community building, family building in this world, no matter the culture. But yeah, then I think as I began my consulting and training, I started to, I guess I inherently knew just the power of story. If you can get somebody you don't know well to open up and start sharing with you some of the stories of their lives, you form an immediate bond.
When I think of, you know, this vast experience you are bringing to the table regarding working with stories, do you see any cultural differences between the readiness to tell stories in the US, in Japan, and in Mexico?
Oh yeah, lots. And I think we can back up way back before even storytelling, just to speaking style and listening style. When I was living in Japan and speaking Japanese 24/7, you listen with 2 ears there, but in Japanese, you listen with your whole body. You listen for context. You listen with the hair on your arms. I mean, you listen. Whereas in Mexico, at least in Mazatlan, right? Mexico is a very diverse country as well. But here in Mazatlan, people love to talk. They want to, they have generally expressing a lot of confidence, a lot of outgoingness. They'll tell you stories and stories and stories and stories. And sometimes I think, do you guys ever listen? Everybody's talking all at the same time. It's a rare occurrence when I find someone who's really a good listener. So I think, yeah, every culture has different strengths about storytelling and story listening.
Mm.
And of course, the way we tell our stories, is it matter of fact? Is it the data and the facts? Or is it heavy on the emotion? Is it heavy on the context and the background? And, you know, is it more superficial or more getting into the philosophy or the angst? So, yeah, one of the stories that comes to mind from my career as an interculturalist is I was working with the top 50 people at a major, like a Fortune 10 organization that I will not name. But the CEO was there, as it was the top, 30 people, 40 people globally. And they had invited 10 kind of young up and coming executives in their 30s mostly. And I will never forget this young Ghanaian woman. The CEO said to everyone, I want to have a diverse workforce, and I want some of you, people of color, differently able to be sitting where I'm sitting in the CEO seat. And she stood up with her elegance that is not part of my repertoire. She was just so beautiful, powerful, gorgeous, well-spoken. And she basically said, sir, I would never want your job in a million years. To me, you don't have a life. All you do is work. If I were going to sit in the executive chair, I would want to have a life balance, and that will make me a better leader because I will care about the people and the planet as we're guiding this organization. And, we all just sat there just with our mouths open because it was so powerful. And at the same time, in that context, which is in this case was very European-based company and very white European-based company, I also felt like, oh my gosh, her telling the story is taking her off of the fast track, I'm afraid. So how can I debrief this now so that people hear it instead of saying, okay, she doesn't ever want to be CEO and she's not CEO material. How do I get this to focus on how do we start defining that CEO role so that people from more diverse backgrounds will want to and strive to be in that position.
So what was your
powerful.
reaction? Yeah, so what was your reaction? How did you actually react afterwards?
In that case, I honestly, we talked about what she had just said, and then I called a break because I wanted to go talk to the CEO privately to make sure that when we came back, he would switch the conversation to talking about the role of the CEO and how does that need to change if we're really going to be an inclusive company. Because otherwise I felt that there was that big white elephant in the room of she just did what she was requested to do, but she took herself out of the running for promotion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know that that was the right thing to do. It's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Fascinating, because this is also something that we all know that, of course, currently storytelling as a word is a very hijacked term, and it has been also instrumentalized and misused. And there are lots of programs for executives how to work with stories. So storytelling for leaders, storytelling for managers, and so on and so forth. This is also the tricky part, because we need to pay attention that it's not only about story techniques, that it's not only about, rhetoric and all the tricks nice to have, but above all this, what you are emphasizing in your fantastic example, that it's so much about the attitude, about the mindset, about the self-reflection on the heart set also. Yeah.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
this,
I mean, to me, that woman really had access to her. She had integrity. She knew what she wanted. She knew she was. She knew who she wanted to be. And she wanted to be successful. And she didn't want to sell her soul in order to be successful in an organization that she did not see as welcoming her in ways that were ways she didn't want. And she was brave enough to speak out about that. And most people aren't, I don't think. So to me, there is danger in storytelling, because when you tell an authentic story in a community environment or in a workplace, that puts you in a vulnerable position. And to me, vulnerability is a great strength. To be able to be vulnerable is hugely important if we're going to solve world problems. And sadly, there are many people who love to take advantage of any vulnerability. So the story I just told to me was a good example of that, where I pray that that she didn't end up getting taken advantage of at some point because she told her truth. That's exactly the wrong outcome we want from storytelling.
Yeah.
So,
Yes, definitely. Definitely. When I was asked once what are the top three aspects about working with stories in the leadership context and working with stories in general, actually, I came up with the ABC of storytelling, and A stands for authenticity. So what you are also addressing, authenticity, integrity, and really, being able to repeat the same story with really, this inner strength in different contexts. Yeah. Not just changing it depending on yes, what I've got from the situation. Yeah, but really,
right.
being being authentic in this way. B stands for building relationships. So this is also something you have addressed with, connecting with to other people. And C stands for courage. So, you just gave a beautiful example how it works in the business context. What else actually do you think need the global leaders, so to say, so those who work across cultures, to know when they share their own stories? If it's about sharing their personal stories or stories to motivate people, stories to communicate, yes, their vision, and so on.
That's an interesting question. I think if somebody is that high level of a leader, a CEO, a director, when they're sharing their personal stories, to me, it is very valuable if they can communicate some vulnerability, some humanity. I will say that through my career as a consultant, I've worked with so many very high level leaders, and I've had colleagues who say, aren't you scared to work with people like that? Aren't you intimidated? And I have never thought of it that way, because I'm sitting across from somebody who is a fellow human being who has struggles just like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to understand that person's goals and objectives and struggles and where they're trying to get to and what's getting in the way and what's helping them get there. So I think that for a leader, it's very important for the leader to communicate that to the team, what the struggles are, what the joys are, what the difficulties are, to humanize the leader role, because especially in different cultures where there's high hierarchical differences, we forget that leaders are human and make mistakes, or have just had their mother have cancer and they're upset, or so many different things we can be going through. And then I think when you're a leader telling your own story too, it's difficult because you really want to enable the storytelling back, and you want to listen on a deep enough level so that you're hearing it, as with the case I just mentioned about the Ghanaian woman, that the CEO hopefully really heard. She was saying so many things, and the important things maybe were about the organization more than herself.
Yeah.
So we need to help, I think a facilitator like you, like myself, can help pull out the different aspects of that story and learning for us. It's reminding me of another story. I'm sorry, I'm giving too
Yeah,
many.
go ahead.
I remember in another organization working with she was a Jainian woman. Her religion was Jainism. And they did that diversity and inclusion exercise where you line up all the participants line up in a line, and you take a step forward for your privilege and a step back if you're a person of color, step back if you're a woman, step back if you're of a certain age, step back if you're not Christian. So here, this poor woman, she was the director of her organization, and she's way back in the back against the back wall, and most everyone else is against the front wall. And she's the one telling me the story. And she says, Diane, you will never believe. I mean, I was standing there in the back of the room thinking, yes, I am a director, and this is how difficult this has been for me for the last 35 years. You all have made it so hard. I can't hold on to who I am. And what did the facilitator do? The diversity and inclusion facilitator? He stood up and he said, look at how inclusive your organization is, because even someone with so much lack of privilege can succeed.
Wow.
And they went on to the next topic.
That's tough.
Yeah, it takes the breath out of my lungs. It's so, to think that somebody working in our field, my former field, and yet we all make mistakes. We all have brain, lose our heads. But I just thought, my gosh, it destroyed that woman for quite some time. Here she was like 8 years later telling the story. Finally, she said it was the first time she told it because she was so upset. Anyway, so I do think stories can be powerful too, because we learn from them. I've shared this story quite a bit when I'm training interculturalists, because I think it reminds us of the ethics we have, the responsibility we have when we have a room full of people looking at us as some kind of expert, whether we want to be the expert or not. So.
Thank you very much, Diana, because it also is such a very important issue, that when we spread the invitation and offer the space where people can share their stories, that we immediately take this responsibility for the psychological safety.
Mm-hmm. And it's a heavy responsibility.
Oh, yes.
Especially across cultures, because we don't know how is somebody responding. We can't necessarily read everyone's nonverbals, and we don't know them. We're just there for the day or for 3 days.
Yeah. And it also reminds me of one situation where I was so completely speechless because a colleague of mine actually convinced me to join her and to go to, I don't remember, whatever northern German city to a workshop for women, how to become successful female leaders. And if we can talk about culture shock I have ever experienced, this was one of my biggest ones. Because it was already the moment when I spoke German. So it wasn't the language issue that I didn't understand what the female guru is talking about. It was really about the content. And she said that we are in the male world, and if we want to be successful, we have to learn about car brands and how to repair a motorbike and drink beer and watch soccer, so that we've got enough themes to talk about whenever there is an after work party, not to run home, but of course to join and to talk, because this is where networking is giving you
Yeah.
opportunities to succeed and to climb the success ladder. Of course, to wear, best case, short hair or hair together, suit, and all this,
So
So
put on a costume and change who you are just so you can succeed 8 hours a day.
exactly, exactly. And I was so shocked about it because, it wasn't authentic to me, not at all. It
Mhm.
was kind of course, this is our, everyday theme in the intercultural field. How much do I need to adapt without losing myself in the process?
Right, exactly. And that is so key. And Joanna, to me, that has been long under talked about in this field. You and I have talked about this before in other contexts that, 20, 30, I've been working in the field, in the intercultural field, probably 40 years. But I think back in the day, it was people didn't know what diversity, equity, inclusion was. They didn't know what interculturalism was or transculturalism. So we got to go into the client and define it. And my definition was always about, we want everyone to feel like they can bring their best to the table and contribute fully and be recognized for it. And we fully believed in this power of innovation when people are comfortable working together and being themselves, right? That you hire diversity, you need to promote diversity, not hire people and then make them all be cookie cutters. I remember the theme now of my last story was finding yourself, how to be yourself in a new culture, right?
Yeah.
And that was just lost over the last 30, 40 years, it did become for quite some time about adapting. So when in Rome, act like the Romans do, right?
Yeah.
Which you maybe for a business trip you can do that, but if you're actually emigrating to somewhere, you can't. You have to be yourself. You have to find ways to be yourself and be valued for it, right? That's how we succeed.
Yes, this is of course working with stories on the individual level. Yeah, just like you have emphasized right now, really talking to other people and sharing experiences with them, sharing also a little bit of our emotional state so that we also connect and can get to know each other better way. Nevertheless, what stories enable us is also to have a look behind, let's say, these huge narratives, such as regional narratives, also cultural narratives in terms of what is very, very specific for one ethnic group, and so on and so forth. So we are working really at different levels. Yeah, when we think of intercultural, many people immediately think of the international aspect, but it's not the case. When we are sharing stories, we immediately jump into sharing stories at many levels, so that we are talking also about issues such as gender, such as age, of course, social background, and so on and so forth.
Well, you look at where I was born in the United States, right? The last few years with the Me Too movement, the stories of women, as I grew up in my career, nobody my age and with my career trajectory, we have so many stories to tell of gender harassment, of sexual harassment, of being discriminated against. I mean, when I presented my master's thesis, I will never forget the doctor teaching me, the PhD, walked up to me and said, "Diane, that was terrific," but then he pinched my cheeks. "You're just so cute. It's hard to take you seriously." And, it's just like, I have worked 6 years on this thesis, and that's what you're going to tell me. You're crushed as a young woman. And also in the States, I would say just the power of the African American stories now. Most of the white Americans do not understand the story of the African American experience, and we still don't. But at least it's a story being told and heard. Even the people who don't want to hear it are having to hear it. It's everywhere, and we all deal with it differently. But thank goodness. I mean, we can't go forward unless we hear one another's realities and start to forge a joint reality in which we can all bring our best to the community.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for these examples of the collective stories, because it's of course very, very powerful. And you
Yeah.
just gave the examples from the United States. What about Mexico, where you are based right now?
Well, it's interesting. Where I live in Mazatlan, we love it. We have lived here full time for 13 years. We have owned a home here for 20. It's on the coast, on the Pacific Ocean. It's a beautiful place. Here in Mexico, people are not using their voice. Here in Mazatlan, anyway, people are not using their voice to speak up for the environment, to speak up for their patrimony. There's a long tradition of wealthy people getting wealthier, as there is in every country, sadly. Yeah, so right now our Last Virgin estuary up north of town is getting developed, but there has been no official announcement at all. It's happening clandestinely. The building is happening and people don't know about it. So that storytelling on Friday and for the next 2 months is trying to raise awareness of what is actually happening and to call the question, how do you want our city to develop? And let's speak up and let the leaders know how we want the city to develop.
Thank you. Thank you so much, because you are, acting at the local level and still having this global mindset. Yeah. So this is actually one of these examples of the global narratives currently. Yeah.
So with the environment and
exactly,
the watershed.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is what you have addressed right now as an example with Mexico, but also, the shift in women perception in different corners of the world, and that it's really about, this world of obviousness years ago and currently. So these are these huge global stories, these global narratives, just like actually pandemics is such a global narrative where I was so shocked because I heard so many times we all sit in the same boat. Yeah, we need to protect ourselves. It's not the truth. We don't sit in the same boat.
Yeah, well, I think we do, but I think we don't realize we do.
Yes, however, there are huge differences between different regions, between also, the possibilities, how to protect ourselves, how to, raise awareness, and so on and so forth.
Cultural differences and personal differences.
Exactly.
Spiritual tradition differences. Yeah, we're layers of many, many different cultural influences, that's for sure. So even though we may be in a shared planet, we have very different perceptions of and very different experiences of that shared planet, that's for sure.
Diana, I have also one question that I actually pose all my guests, and I'm really, really looking forward to hearing from you, your inspiration. What actually helped you during the pandemics? What is the word and what is the
word? Yeah. Ichigo Ichie. Speaking of Japanese words, Ichigo Ichie, and I sent you the kanji characters for it, Joanna. It was one of the first calligraphy when I studied brush painting, one of the first set of characters I learned. And it just, each moment is once in a lifetime, I guess is how I would translate it. So it's valuing, like right now, we're together, we're doing this podcast. There will never be another moment in time like this one. We'll hopefully see each other many other times. But so for me, the pandemic was just that. At first it was, oh my gosh, I have to stay indoors and this is getting really terrible. And then like you took each moment once in a lifetime. You started your podcast. I started to go outside in back of me. We live on the ocean, but in the back is a estuary, a lagoon. And because of the lockdown, all of the birds came out to play.
Wow.
We saw all the animals in all the cities, right? Well, here it was the waterfowl. So we had cranes and herons and ibis and you name it out back. So every morning, every evening, I took my camera out and took a walk, and they saved my life, those birds. It was really wonderful. So I had hope for our planet that maybe we would learn to clean up our air and our water a little bit, from this. But of course, now I see that what has happened is we have all these disposable masks and we're trashing more things than we ever did before, probably. But yeah, so Ichigo Ichie. The other two other things I did during the pandemic that were hugely important to me. One was here in Mazatlan, our doctors and nurses, our medical community, they didn't have masks and they didn't have the overalls that they need to protect themselves during COVID. So we ended up losing about 1/3 of our medical community. It was terrible. So I worked full time for about 9 months, just trying to raise money. We raised a lot of money. And then also working with a team to try to get the N95 masks. There were a lot of knockoffs that weren't real, trying to get the real ones and the real coveralls. And enough, because the doctors and nurses, they can't use the same one every day. They got to keep changing. So that would be another example for me of just one moment once in a lifetime. I sure don't want to do that again. I don't like fundraising. I don't know how to buy medical stuff, and then the third thing that kept me very busy during the pandemic was we built a house for a young man. I think he's 32. He has diabetes and he's gone blind and he's lost a leg. So he's a graphic designer and he can no longer work to support himself. And his father, who is his caretaker, had a stroke. So we also raised money to build a small house for them. I mean, it's a small house, 3 meters by 3 meters perhaps. And it has a running water with a shower and a toilet and a kitchen, a little dining table and a bed for the 2 men. But they're ecstatic, and thank goodness, in Mexico, you can build a house like that out of concrete fairly cheaply. But it was a delight to me because when we presented them the keys, I said 85 families have poured their love into this house for you.
Wow.
So every day you are here, feel the love of those 85 families.
Wow, what a story.
So that was a nice privilege. Yeah.
I'm really, really deeply touched. Wonderful, Diana. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's good to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you very, very much for your insights, for stories you have shared, for inspirations you have given, also how to work with stories in the leadership context, in the intercultural context across cultures. And I'm really, really looking forward to meeting you in person.
Well, I'm very happy you have dedicated so much time and effort to storytelling. It's a beautiful focus for your work, I think. It does a lot of good in this world, Joanna. Thank you.
Thank you very much.